know nobody wanna die alone, but that's the road that we all on. I can never ever sell my soul, so I know I'ma live long. I know I'ma get on, I know it all goes on. I don't wanna hold on, but I can't let it go for too long. I know I gotta go hard, till I'm down in the tombstone.
What's up guys, hope everyone is doing well. In today's video I'm going to be going over some important updates for Bitcoin given its recent volatility in the last 36 hours or so. I'm also going to touch on XYO, LCX, SHX, and XDC towards the end of the video. But here on this chart, this is a 2-day chart, which is an update to this chart, which I've been going over, and I put in a video around, touted around how I do believe once we do eventually break 21,000, had the hopes that it would break right here when we were pushing 21,000 not too long ago instead of being rejected. I was saying if we do break 21,000, continue to hold that and eventually see movement towards the upside, then I would believe that that would be a rather good confirmation that the bull market is probably going to ensue and a reversal on that hand. But unfortunately we did go to the downside. So far we have wicked as low as to around 15.5. But going back to this chart as an updated version, I also was recently going over, and this is with respect to these yellow lines you'll see on here, this cup and handle pattern formation you'll be seeing. Not necessarily maybe should be really entertaining this at this point, but at this point I'm kind of just entertaining it. As you can see, as successive just lowering curves where eventually we will find some sort of support, and it will line up with one of these lowering curves that I'm using. And I still do believe whether or not we go down to even 14,000 and we go a little bit lower, I'm personally am inclined to believe that we're probably going to stop around the 15.5, 15,000 area that we've been to so far. But also at the end of the day, we could be at 12,000 in the next 2 weeks or by the end of this month. I mean, who really knows? But really the baseline for all this is that we are currently, we were, once we had 17.5 or so as the bottom, around 75, 74% down from all-time highs. As you can see now, we are 77, 78% down. Again, 82 would probably be about where we'd go to meet more of the criteria in the past, which again pushes down around $12,300. If we push, I mean, just 80, 79, that's around $13,000 or so. I mean, really, all of these are fair game at this point. I do believe if we do see anything lower, it's going to be more of in a quick fashion. Again, similar to how I pointed out in the 2015 bottom, and also just similar to occurrence how we see with the March crash. We also have to realize the FTX and the Binance things that happened pretty much at the exact same time all of this happened, which this might actually be more of a news type of thing occurrence with that, which inclines me to believe that we hopefully will find some support, given that we are meeting very nice Fibonacci retracements as well. Over here we have this left one with respect to the bottom. We set this local bottom in June of 2021, set the all-time high 69,000 around November of that same year. So far we're meeting the 1.618, 1.672, 562, just the golden, one of the golden pocket zones that I use. So hopefully we will find some support here. It's also lining up with this 1.0618 that I use as kind of a buffer just in case, as I showed Bitcoin, going back to this, has a tendency to, like at the last moment, just go a little bit lower than it did for the first time. So this 1.0618 is kind of what I use to judge that, and we are nicely meeting that right now as well. Maybe we'll get candles to close a little bit lower, closer towards 16,000 than we are right now. But personally, I believe that we will eventually see a reversal, probably definitely before this year is out, whether or not we even go as low as 12,000 or we find some strength where we are currently at and bottomed out now for Bitcoin. But things still stay the same. Once we do find a reversal, I believe 21,000 is still going to be an important value. If it follows anything and similar to this pattern that I have on here, then 21,000 is obviously going to be important. Obviously we need to eventually break 25,000, and then I think 28 to 32,000 is the range that Bitcoin will go to once we do finally break through 25,000 and continue to move higher into what I would believe would be the reversal into the bull market. But the other thing that I want to go over here on this chart is if these three trend lines that I have on here for this RSI, you can see for this first one over here, back when we reached our bottom back in June, pretty much it was all of June for the most part, May, June, and July. So we finally found this minor relief from around 28 to 69,000. You can see it looks very similar to the one we are currently at if you look at the period, which I have this third trend line on here. And if you look at these two yellow patterns over here to the right of this RSI, you can see they're exactly the same. Their length was different, obviously, but their structure is the same. You can see we had an initial upwards movement, so we can count this as 1. Then we go down 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 pivot points if you use 0 as the first one over here. And then the same thing for this bottom one right here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then 8. And that 8 leads us into where we're currently at right now, which is what parallels with what it looked like on July of 2021 before we got that relief rally, or just a reversal in general. There's also bullish divergence right here. We're also getting bullish divergence right here. And it also is just in general similar to this one that I have here in the middle, more from around January to April when we saw some consolidation back here, which also looked very hopeful, but unfortunately we got rejected from that as well. And also just the point with these trend lines are and rather than looking at the fact that we've gone lower than this trend line I have on here for this current one and even these previous ones, it maybe not necessarily look at it as it's breaking a trend and a bad thing. Perhaps this is just showing you that this is some sort of local low and this is a good opportunity to buy. And history definitely shows it on this 2-day chart going all the way back to September of 2020 in these pretty three clearly similar occasions that I pointed out on here. Stock RSI is also on the upper range, which hopefully we could hold the upper range to continue seeing at least some consolidation in the values we have met so far at these lows, and we'll carry on some sort of movement, acceleration, velocity towards the upside with respect to the RSI and the stock RSI. And obviously the MACD down here is just, it's as low as it's been in quite some time. It's the lowest it's gone since we started to see this tumble down from around 25,000. So I mean, assuming this RSI situation that I pointed out with these black trend lines ends up playing through as it has in the past, we could hopefully see a strong momentum swing here back above this 0 point that I have on this MACD with this dash trend line down here. I think that was about all that I really wanted to go over here on this 2-day chart for Bitcoin. I wanted to touch on this 15-minute chart right here. I put this on here like last night or something, I don't know, in the last 16 hours I put this on here. And I was looking at this, I was telling myself it's most likely going to go lower. Unfortunately, so far we have met that very nicely. We could go a little bit lower down to 15,000 about just on the dot. But right now we are seeing some sort of consolidation. You can see how the price is obviously very negatively oriented here in terms of the slope with respect to the support right here. And if you go down and look at the RSI at the same period, you can see that it's starting to flatten out. I mean, which really for this entire time Bitcoin has been tanking, the RSI has been flat, which again, it doesn't really mean much at this point. We could continue to go lower. I mean, for all we know, we could be at 12,000 in the next week or 2 weeks or in the next month and a half. Really, only time is going to tell, and it's really all just up to Bitcoin at this point. But I did want to point this out, that it is another possible inclination towards the fact that Bitcoin could bottom out more at around 15 to 16,000, assuming anything lower than 15,000 is not going to be actualized going forward here on this chart as a longer time frame, higher time frame, which I still believe is pointing to the fact that the bottom in general has been set in. I personally have been saying that I do believe the bottom was set in with 17.5. So far we have wicked obviously lower than that, but we are still in general, for the most part, I'd have to say, as you can see up here at our current bottom, we're still pretty much within the same range, and we're just seeing really a major wick right now, which, as I pointed out, if we look back here in 2015 here on this chart on the 2 weekly, we could be seeing something similar back to how we saw in August of 2015. Again, unless we fully start to lose. We haven't actually closed below. This is the 200 estimated moving average here on this 2-week chart. We haven't closed below this moving average yet, but if I would have to say here on this 2-week chart, if we start closing below this moving average, then I'd be inclined to say that we probably will head towards, 14, 12, maybe even 10,000 at the worst case scenario, I'd have to say. So hopefully we will find support right here, and this will end up just turning out just to be a major wick as a scare tactic or something like that. But I want to point out this RSI on here, which is a pretty clear picture. You can see I drew this inside pitchfork on here from the bottom of 2015 We have our high right here in 2017, and then to the first of the two of the double bottom that we set from 2018 to the March crash in 2020 for Bitcoin. You can see each time with respect to this, with the last two in our current bottoms that we set, came perfectly down to this blue range. It actually perfectly hit it in June this year. So again, I do believe that the bottom, whether or not we've looked a little bit lower now, we're in the bottom range, and I would have to say, according to this, likelihood sways that we won't go any lower than the 15,000 we've gone to so far. Again, we may see some licks down to like 14.5 or 4, I don't know, but I mean, at the end of the day, it seems like there's not too much downside to see at the very least. And at least dollar cost averaging right now is at least a smarter thing to do than just waiting, I suppose. You know, you don't want to get lost waiting as it go to lower. But the other thing that I wanted to point out here is on this stock RSI. I pointed out in the past, but you can see these M's, according to these black paths that I have on here, pop up and they lead you into the bear market, where the stock RSI, acting as an acceleration indicator, bottoms out, flattens out, just showing that Bitcoin's not going to have any oomph during these times. It may move up, but it's ultimately going to continue to go down until you see the stock RSI lift off and then enter this upper range to carry on some sort of positive acceleration. Again, we see the second M right here. We get brought down, same thing, similar to the 2015 bear market. We're led back up again. We made our intermediate high in 2019, had a drop down to our March crash, went up towards the highs we set, leading into 64,000, 65,000. And then from there we ended up printing a bearish divergence on this stock RSI, along with Bitcoin going higher in price, but the stock RSI had already entered this lower range. We've been consolidating down here at the bottom, similar to these previous two macro bottoms we have set. We're starting to see lift off now, so hopefully we will, again just confirming the bottom that seems to be pretty clear here on these higher time frames, even though these lower time frames are getting quite scary here in the present moment. Again, we'll see something similar here on this MACD. Paying attention to this black curve, or this black path again, you'll see how we have an overall 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So just a bearish impulse to the downside. It has an initial drop, the main drop, and then you see a ladder M, final M we see towards the bottom. Pretty much the same thing you'll see right here in this previous one. You'll see it on just about all of them. Right here you can see this first major drop, and we see this M made down here at the bottom as a double bottom. You can also see the same thing. I didn't draw it on here, but it happened on the March crash as well. You see this main drop, and you see an M right here, led us right into the March crash, and then went parabolic from that point onwards. So again, I'd have to say personally, if I'm going to insert some sort of bias, that we won't be going down for too much longer if Bitcoin is going to go down a little bit longer. I do think the bottom will be set in before this year's out, whether or not we stake here, where we're currently at around 15.7 or so, 15,000, or we go to 12,000 or not. But outside of that, here to touch on these altcoins. Here for XYO, nothing too much that I have really to say about this one. It still holds same as I said last time. It's going to be around, assuming we hold the bottom, we're currently at around right now, just adhering to the pretty much, we're just slightly lower. We haven't closed a little bit lower yet here on this 2-day, but we are going to be encroaching upon that soon if we don't move up at some point here in the next week, 2 weeks or 3 weeks or so. But it's still at around a 35,000% move up towards around, I believe, no higher than $3 at this point. In the past I said $3 to $16 because I was still kind of confused on the XYO to Bitcoin and the XYO to USD pair and comparing those two, but I do think no higher than $3 is what we'll see again. I think this one will top out earlier than most of the other coins around May, June of next year. Again, we'll have to see if that ends up happening as well. But here for the indicators, and again, another important thing to see here is, again, we have just been moving up on this MACD over time, whereas the price has been going down for the most part. As I said, just kind of converging upon this 0 point. Hopefully eventually we'll have that final momentum thrust towards the upside. You can see here on this stock RSI, we've finally come down. We've made a nice double bottom here, so hopefully, whether or not we stagger in these lows for a little bit longer, or we even go a little bit lower, perhaps XYO comes down here on this Bitcoin chart back to this previous consolidation we set up at around 6 zeros, and then it has 1 5. I'm not sure how much that is. I haven't done the comparisons, but somewhere around here is where I believe it would go if we do go lower. I'll go ahead and draw a box around it just to give it more of a specific range. Again, for the most part, all the altcoins are down lower than Bitcoin is at the current moment. This one's at down 83%. I mean, 90% is pushing about as low as I think it probably could go, because I do think this is a very, very viable coin. It's very sophisticated. It's very unique. I believe it's basically, in a simple way, just mapping the real world data in terms of a physical sense, and like us seeing things and like interacting with things. It's mapping that into the blockchain, which goes into the fact that XYO is helping, and is, as far as I'm aware, if I remember correctly, is like the main contributor in mapping out the metaverse in terms of like our real world and how it actually looks. Because as crazy as it sounds, eventually we will be able to like full on simulate the world around us, and I will be able to just put on a pair of goggles or just put on a pair of glasses, or maybe I'll have some chip inserted into me that can project into my mind's eye and give me the simulation that I'm walking throughout the Mojave Desert, but I'm in my house in the United States of America. So I mean, the potentials here for this coin are very large. Microsoft, I know, is behind it. They have a lot of partners. Chainlink is associated with them as well. I mean, I think, and also it can help with FedEx. I don't know if it's FedEx. It might be FedEx, but one of the major like shipping companies is partnering with them, which their utilization case in terms of XYO's project factors into this in form of, because of the fact that it's mapping a geospatial mesh framework basically around the globe. That is, location services is what it's going to be able to help a lot in terms of like GPSs, just things along those along that nature, which means that you imagine like never having a package get lost again because it's associated with the blockchain, which then tracks it throughout the routing network that is associated with the blockchain. But outside of that, again, I do think this is a very good project. Again, things are kind of sucky right now. It's not good to see the price go down, but I do think this is a good project to continue to put your money in a rational and effective way in form of like dollar cost averaging, because the markets are so volatile at the end of the day. But here for LCX, this one does not have hardly any price data for any of the charts here on TradingView, but on CoinMarketCap it has enough data for me to accurately try to predict what the upcoming high could be with respect to how it behaved during the last parabolic run that we saw for Bitcoin, which is going to fall in line with this chart right here again. So we are in this phase 1.1 right now. We had our bullish parabolic run from March crash up to the $64,000 high. So according to the structure of the markets and this cycle system you see on here, going from phase 1 to phase 2, I'll have videos to more elaborately explain this in the beginning and also at the end of the video to help more explain things that I'm talking about in this video if you're interested in it. But essentially what I'm saying is I believe we're going to get another parabolic impulse whenever the bottom gets set in, similar to how things behaved after the March crash, up towards mid 200,000s, approximately 230 to 260,000. I feel like is a sweet spot, although it could go to around 150,000, 130,000, or as high as around 300,000. But according to that and how this coin behaved during the last parabolic run, it moved 67,000%, which means it takes it up to around $28, $29, $30. Again, I think most of the highs will come in around end of second half of next year, 2023. Some of them may bleed into the first 3 months of 2024, or some of them might top out like May, June, a little bit first half of next year, because again, I mean, at the end of the day, none of us know what we're talking about, but altcoins have a tendency to lag behind Bitcoin topping out, and some of them have even shown a tendency to top out like beforehand. But for the most part, I think most of the market will top out sometime around the second half of next year. And it seems like around $28, $29, $30 adheres to how it behaved last time. Although, if it doesn't carry on out, kind of like this, I'll call it a relief rally that we got from around 28,000 to 69,000, kind of to make that double top that we saw. If we don't get that small jump, kind of like copied over into the next run that we'll see, then it only will go around 17,000, taking us up to around $7.77 or so, $7 $8 or so, which lines up with the two. This other one lined up, as you can see, 2.5 to 2.55. The 1.618 lines up at around $2.80, up to the 1.786 around $4.30. That's ranging from as low as around 6,000%, again up to around at most 67,000% that this coin could be moving. If we take a look down here at the RSI's indicators, stock RSI and the MACD, you can see that the RSI compared to price is polar opposite. Price has been going down, starting to round out a little bit now, but you can see the RSI has been objectively upwards the entire time. It's just been in a linear path, albeit volatile towards the upside. And we can see the stock RSI down here, and it's in a nice place too. Again, there's not much data for this chart, so it's kind of hard to really say much, but although it does seem like that the bottom is being set in, even though we could go a little bit lower. The stock RSI is indicating that we are at least being held towards the upside, which again obviously doesn't mean much on here, because you can see, I typically say a lot of times it's good to see the stock RSI towards this upper range, because that will at least mean that it's going to go sideways, or at best case scenario have a nice bullish pump. But the more we can hold this upper range, the better. If we start really getting entrenched in this lower range on the stock RSI, then we'll probably come down maybe to 2 cents or so. Now, if I had to guess, that would adhere with Bitcoin going around 12,000, 10,000, 14,000, just lower than it already is, as I mentioned earlier. But again, here on this MACD, we're seeing how it just, as you can see, price, it's the exact opposite. The MACD literally looks like the opposite of price, just about. It's almost like the price looks kind of like, excuse me, but it looks like a hook almost, like just not as much as this looks like a hook. But this has been going up. Even this has been, like the MACD's kind of been like swaying towards the upside, whereas, you know, obviously price is going down to the downside. Getting these nice RSI pink vectors right here. Again, hopefully indicating that this is just a general range that we will find a bottom out in. That's about all for this one. Again, 67,000%, that's around a 672x at the most, around second half of next year, early 2024 at the latest. Here for SHX, I finally found, again on CoinMarketCap, enough price data to, again, predict it according to the phase cycle system that I previously mentioned. This one moved with respect to this context 28,000% last time, around a 280x or so, 270x, which puts this one up to around 14 cents or so, as low as around 7 cents or so, if it doesn't have that kind of, you know, as I mentioned, that kind of like final relief rally that I said kind of solidified the double top from 28,000 to 69,000. But if we take a look here, this one, LCX, SHX, and XDC look rather similar in their how they've been going down, and then their RSIs and whatnot. You can see here, looking, let me pull it back up here. These look just about identical, almost. So, except for the stock RSI, that's the main difference. But again, like, we're getting bullish divergence here. The price has been obviously heavily swayed to the downside. The RSI has been slightly upside oriented, mostly sideways. Again, we're seeing something similar here with the MACD converging around the 0 point. Eventually this sideways pressure we're building up will be released, you know, just similar to how a spring over time compresses. This will have to be built up and released at some point. And it seems like as long as Bitcoin wants to agree and it doesn't continue bleeding on us, that we could hopefully be setting in the bottom here for SHX and these coins that I've mentioned at so far, at the relative current lows that they're at so far. But another interesting thing to see is like Bitcoin's going lower, but most of these altcoins just aren't, like XYO isn't really drastically lower. It hasn't technically set any lower lows yet. Same thing for LCX right here. SHX, I mean, even Ethereum, which I don't have it pulled up on here, like all the altcoins look better than Bitcoin right now, even though they're dropping with it. But Bitcoin's just, which I guess that just kind of ties into, I mean, Bitcoin's just slowly losing its strength over time. But that's about all that I really wanted to touch on here for SHX. Again, similar time frame, could bleed into 2024, first 3 months or so, if it has this final jump towards around 14 cents. If it hits around 6 or 7 cents, I'm more inclined to believe that will be second half of next year, although this could be something that surprises us more in the first half of next year. But here for XDC, again, this is what I want to point out. You can see how this one, is having a lot better structure than Bitcoin is. This one it hasn't closed lower, hasn't wicked lower, or anything. Again, a lot of these altcoins just look structurally better than Bitcoin does right now, and I feel like it's kind of just a massive scare tactic in all honesty. But again, we could go down to 12,000. Who really knows? But here on this chart, the indicators down here aren't really seeing any bullish divergences or anything. Stock RSI is moving up, which is nice. Hopefully we'll continue to see this upper ground maintained, and Bitcoin will snap back up in kind of like a sharp V-shape reversal soon, instead of continuing to go down. Similar thing down here with the MACD. We've hit our lows, and we are now coming up, converging upon the zero, kind of just winding around it. Something I've mentioned in the past is, if you want to imagine, if you can, like when you're looking at this, imagine price, whatever it be, the lines on here are essentially moving in 3D in a spiral. So like when it goes up, it's like wrapping up, it's coming up and it's wrapping over away from you across this dashed line that I have on here. And then it starts coming down and it's heading towards you, and it's about to coil again once it reaches this bottom. And that's what I say whenever it's just kind of compressing and coiling around and converging on zero. It's like a tornado, really. Once it hits this bottom, it's like a tornado, and it just keeps spiraling and spinning until it converges. You know, at that point where it touches the ground, then it eventually, you know, according to this context, is going to release pressure towards the upside. You know, we hope. But price target for this one, as you can see, if we do get that final kind of like blow off top towards more into 2024 for some of the altcoins, I guess Bitcoin as well, but this pushes more around $7.80 or so, $7 to $8. It just tops out more sometime next year, whether the first half or the second half. That's around $4 to $5. If we continue to go lower, we haven't met the 0.618 yet for this chart. A lot of the other coins really haven't met the 0.618 or have even gone as low as the 0.382. But the 0.618, this 0.562 to the 672, has been a really nice range so far within the entire cryptocurrency market. So this one seems to possibly be holding up better, and it definitely has performed very well. I mean, it went 35,000%. That's a 350x. That's nothing, definitely nothing to scoff at. It's also, as I've gone over my many coins in my previous videos, we're getting this typical ABCD pattern you can see on here, just further in alignment with the structure of the current phase that we're in with Bitcoin. Here I'll draw the first one right here. Just looks like a lightning bolt. Isn't always going to look pretty, doesn't have to look super pretty, but the point is it's just a ABCD pattern right there. Then I'll draw our next one. This one started from the March crash. 65,000 was really the all-time high. Yeah, we went a little bit higher with 69,000, but realistically, like structurally wise, 64,000 was the high. Whether or not you want to draw it to this low or down to 17.5, point is that we are just getting, again, you can see this is also a very nice ABCD pattern right here. This one's very symmetrical, and this actually, I don't know how close I could get this to. I mean, at the end of the day, who knows where the price is going to go for the all-time high, but 4.236, this is as close as I can get it, 4.212, but 4.236, obviously that's already a Fibonacci retracement because 0.236 is, but 4.236, as I've gone over in the past, I'm also a polymath. Outside of this, I'm very knowledgeable in the realm of physics, psychology, also history in terms of spiritual studies and metaphysics and plenty of other things, but basically the number 4.236 is basically just kind of like a number that, if you're mathematically and physically inclined in terms of these studies, would instantly jog in your mind like just the entire structure of the universe. So I'm just kind of pointing that out there as this is just a fun little fact that it is likely to push around the approximately $242,000 value that I've been mentioning for quite some time whenever the bottom does finally get set in. Another interesting thing is, as you can see, 4.236, 242,000. We're seeing the number 42 here. Light has to reflect out of a prism at the angle. It's approximate. It's an approximate angle of like 40 to 43 degrees. But 42, 43 degrees is a really nice and prime angle, which 43 is a prime number. Which I'm not trying to get off in too much of a tangent, but I just wanted to quickly point that out there. I like to point that out every time I see some numbers that kind of line up and make nice sense. But again, we are just in this similar structure, so I believe that, again, this further confirms this ABCD pattern you see on here. There's technically would be one on here, although the entire price data is not on here. There's also one on here as well. Also Bitcoin, not Bitcoin, but Zoom out real quick here for XYO. As I've gone over in the past, we'll see again a ABCD pattern connecting the pretty much the pivot points. Again, you could draw it right here at this point. I guess we could draw it right here. I went over one of these the other day and it was 64. It's probably a little bit different now that I have to redraw it this way, but I guess technically we didn't make a lower low. Let's see if I put it right here. Yeah, let's draw it something like this. But you can see it's roughly, it was 786 how I had it drawn in my other video, but 786 to 64.786, just kind of, this is nicely lining up with that May-June area that I said. This one might top out earlier. Again, 64 just goes back to a lot of things. Our DNA codons in a human genome, Nintendo 64, Sri Yantra, Hinduism, going back to like the Indian, ancient Vedic times and things like that. I've mentioned this multiple times, so I don't want to go on that tangent again. But that was about all that I really wanted to touch on in this video. Again, here on this 15-minute chart, overall in Bitcoin. If Bitcoin continues to go lower, we'll likely see these altcoins go lower. Although, as I did mention here on this higher time frame chart, this 2-week chart, which I believe is it's a very nice chart to use. I feel like it has some of the best symmetry in it. In terms of like pointing out when the bottom might come in, but I do believe we are in the general bottom range, so I do think personally, if I'm going to insert some sort of bias here, that buying right now would be good. When it comes to these coins right here, these altcoins, these ones that perform the best here are probably going to be, I think XYO is going to be the best one, because if it does top out earlier, then you can get out of this one and then hop into something like LCX, especially if it tops out way later. And this one, if it moves 67,000%, this is one of the best movers I've seen so far. So all that being said, again, that was about all that I really wanted to go over in this video. I'm going to come out with a video at some point in the next few days, just kind of gathering all the altcoins that have moved the highest and kind of just go over more of like a personal view of them and what I think. But that was all that I really wanted to touch on in this video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed, hopefully you're able to learn something, and I hope you all have a blessed day.